Greetings, Internet. On this episode of From the Basement, we're going to take a look at interactable objects and items, because the two of those really go hand in hand. Let's start off talking about items. When you go into the Items tab, you have the ability to create custom items for your quest, but they are very limited in what they can do. Creating them is pretty simple. Just click on the plus item button, give it a name. I'm going to call this the scroll. And then you get this tiny little window here. Don't click on this X. You know, this gets me all the time personally. I keep thinking this is a dialog box. It's not. Clicking on this X will actually prompt you to delete this item. Just keep away from that X, unless you actually want to delete something. If you want to create a new item, you simply click there, and it'll list all of your items in this little format here. And that one I don't actually need, so let's get rid of it. The icon, of course, you can't leave as this very uninspiring circle with a line through it, so you need to click on Change. And you have a whole massive list of different icons that you can use. Now, keep in mind, despite the fact that you can use equipment icons, none of these actually have any stats. Now, so I can take this super glowy armor here, armor icon, and I can use it, but there's no stats associated. I can't equip it. There's nothing that you can do with this item, basically, regardless of what icon you happen to choose for it. So since I called this a scroll, I actually want to have it be a scroll, so we have our friend text filter here. Type in scroll, and I can see all the different scrolls I have. I think I'll just grab the miscellaneous scroll icon here, click OK. You see it's updated here. Now the description allows us to basically set up what the tooltip is for this item. When the user mouses over this item in their inventory, this is going to show up. Now you only have 100 characters here, so you're kind of limited into what you can do with this. It's great for short little notes or perhaps reminders to the user as to what they're supposed to be doing. Not really enough to be trying to tell a story here unless you're like spreading it over several pages, and that has a problem, which we'll talk about in a moment. So just so that we have something to see once we get into the editor, meet me at the dead end by the traps. Yeah, that's sort of an example of, you know, the types of things you might put on item descriptions. Like I said, notes to the user, reminders, what it's supposed to be used for, things like that. And that's it as far as creating an item goes. There's really not much you can do with these. These are primarily flavor items. Now, there's a couple of really important restrictions with these. First, and this is probably one of the more key ones, they do not stack. Even if it is the exact same item that you have in inventory, it will not stack. So if you require the player to pick up 3 items, it's going to take up 3 inventory slots. So you've got to be really careful with that. Players are going to get really annoyed with your quest if they have to start throwing away loot because they have to hold 6 of your inventory items in their inventory to be able to complete this quest. It's not going to make people happy. So, now, by all means, use items. Just make sure that the player never really has to carry more than maybe 1 or 2 at a time. I mean, start hitting 3. That's my personal preference here. Start hitting 3 items in inventory at once. You're starting kind of to push the boundaries there. The other core limitation, is that quest items do not transfer between quests. There is absolutely no way to make quest B aware of items that are in quest A. And in fact, as soon as you complete a quest, all of those quest items will be removed from inventory. Now, it is possible for the user to use the little leave dungeon icon, leave quest icon, go back to town with a copy of your quest item, go back into the dungeon, and they'll be able to collect it again. So keep in mind that the player can manipulate things to get multiple copies of your quest items. Now, I can't really imagine most players going through that trouble because it's not really going to mean much of anything for most quests. Just be aware that the user can use that trick. If they use the Leave Dungeon button, they'll be able to come back and re-enter the dungeon and recollect it. The other sort of really important item, or item about items, that's awkward to say, is that NPCs have a pathological and crippling fear of items. They will not touch them. They will not take them. They'll look at them. You can use items as gates for what conversation items are enabled, but an NPC cannot give you an item, or I should say a dialogue. A dialogue cannot give you an item, nor can a dialogue take an item away. In order to give or take items, you have to use an interactable, which is why I'm doing both of these in this lesson here. Not to mention, yeah, we're pretty much done with creating items. There's not much else here we can do. So, oops, wrong tab, maps. Let's take a look at this, and we'll put a collection point in here, have Mr. Ed recognize that we have it in inventory, and see what we can do. So first we'll go into Mr. Ed's conversation, advanced dialogue editor, and we'll add in a response. I found this scroll. And how we set this is the required item, simple enough. We click on that, the scroll, okay, we're done. We'll only be able to take this item, this conversation path, if we have this item in inventory. And so, of course, we'll put in a response here. So you did. He might be a horse, but he's not a particularly talkative. He's a talking horse, but he's not a particularly talkative one. Okay, so we got that set up. Now let's actually get that item in there. We'll go into details, and let's put in a bookcase, actually. Or a bookshelf, I should say. And let's find one of the ones that are pre-gened. Ah, here we go. Pre-gened with some scrolls inside of it. We'll take that one. Drag it in, plop it down. Now here's where we set the interactable part. There's two things you can set, contact and interactable. You cannot set both. Contact will overwrite interactable in most cases. There's a few cases where this does not happen, mainly when you're using an item as a transition point between maps on the story tab. It's really about the only time you can have interactable and contact on the same thing. But if it's contact, that'll overwrite it in the vast majority of situations. Interactable is for, things like collecting items, opening doors, pulling switches. Not that we have switches yet. Cryptic, we need switches. Thank you. But that's what interactable is for. Now, this interact text, you got to be careful here. This is what appears after the press F2. That will always be, it'll be press F2, whatever is inside this box here. So you don't want to capitalize it, and you always have to keep in mind that you're going to have that first part. So press F2, get a scroll. Now, the animation is what animation is going to play while you're doing this. Sometimes you don't want an animation. Sometimes you won't want an animation. For the most part, unless, of course, you are doing something specific for your quest, the interact is what you'd want to use. And they've got a variety of interacts. So I'm going to use interact normal, lanes waist to chest high. So it's going to play that animation. And the duration indicates how long this is going to take. You can go anywhere from instant, you press the F key and bam, you've used it, to long. Now, again, this is personal preference here, but I would argue that unless you want to ensure that the players can't run in, grab an item, and run out before they aggro an encounter, that's really about the only reason why you'd want to use a long animation, because it honestly is long. I mean, so you just sit there and like twiddling your thumbs for like a second and a half or so, which it doesn't sound like much, but when you're playing the game, it just feels like it's taking forever. So, I would recommend keeping it, medium or short, or maybe even instant if it fits. We'll leave this on short. Now, initially, when you're looking at this, you're going to say, "Wait a minute, I don't see any way for me to give items on here." Well, you've got to click on this tiny little button down here, Item Properties, and that's going to expand it out, and it's going to give us some more options. Dropped item, required item, and failure text. Also, consume required item. So for now, on this one, we're just going to worry about dropped item. So if we click here, it's going to show me a list of all the items I've got built. So I can select my scroll, click OK, and now I can get my scroll. So let's hop in real quick and see how this looks. And there's my bookshelf. There you see the press F to get a scroll. So press F, do a short interaction, and you find a scroll, take all. And that is immediately disabled. An interactable, if it gives you an item, it can only be interacted with once. That's it. Yep, wrong key. So now if I come over here to Mr. Ed, which I guess I should have talked to him first, I found the scroll, so you did. But Mr. Ed can't actually do anything with the scroll. He won't take it or anything like that. If I wanted to get rid of it, say perhaps put it in a different bookshelf, return to Foundry, actually cancel. I'm sorry, I gotta fix this guy real quick. By the way, if you happen to be familiar with Maya controls, of course if you're... Yes, I know. My secondary hard drive is failing, but it's a secondary, so I don't really care. It can fail when it feels like it. There we go. I just had to place it properly. Return to Foundry. We'll duplicate that over, and instead of dropping an item, cancel, we'll remove that, and instead we'll have it require an item, and we will consume it, and we'll give a failure text. You don't have a scroll. And now we can see how this plays out. So again, save and play map. Okay. Turn to game. So if we talk to Mr. Ed, now I found the scroll. Yeah, it says you do not have this skill. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's, as good as it can get. So I'm going to come over here. Now if I try and use this one, you don't have a scroll. It's going to give me my failure text. And honestly, I should probably change the interact on that as well. I press F to get the scroll, take it. That one's now been used. And now I can use this one. And I've now placed the scroll. And I don't have it in my inventory, which I probably should have showed the tooltip. So, Control R to reset. Get the scroll. Yep. So I fat finger the keyboard. Here we go. Mouse over it. It shows me my dialog. It reads. Notice it took out my enter. It's not going to recognize enters for white space usage. So it's just going to be all one big clump. And as soon as I complete this adventure, that scroll is going to go away. So if I come over here, oops. I did not mean to enter that mode. Okay. And we'll grab another scroll. And this time try to avoid enter edit mode. And here we got a long animation. And still have the quest, or scroll. So I'm going to complete the quest. Press F to go to the next map. Now I can take a look at my inventory, and the quest item is gone. And again, even if a user tries to take a quest item from one quest to another, it's not going to work because you can't link up anything to it. There's no way to get, like I said before, quest B to recognize an item from quest A. It just simply will not work.
Invoke your patron deity, and you shall be rewarded.
And that is the basics behind interactables and items. Now, there's a few things. Unfortunately, for the dialogue editing, for the required item response, there's no way to actually get it to say you don't have that item, at least not that I'm aware of. If somebody knows how to do that, please feel free to leave that in the comment. But to my knowledge, there is no way to get the you don't have this text to show up as item instead of skill, which is really kind of weird, but that's what we have to work with. And like I said, there is no item dialogue prompts as far as enable win or disable win. You just simply have a dialogue option that you can't take. If you are doing interactables that are going to, if you want to get rid of a quest item during a quest, again, you need an interactable that has a required item and consume required item set to true. And also, it's a good idea anytime that you have a required item that you put in an interact failure text to give your player a hint as to what it is that they are supposed to do. I just got to correct that real quick, even though it doesn't really matter that much. So our required one is going to say put in a scroll, and our other one will say get a scroll. So it's clear to the user what they're supposed to be doing. That's big item. Whenever you've got things like this, you want to make sure that the user, or I guess I should say the player, always has a clear understanding of what it is you want them to do. It might be perfectly clear in your mind what it is that needs to be done. But you have to remember the player can't look into your head. And so you've really got to give, clear indications of, what is it that I'm supposed to do here? If I can't do whatever this is supposed to be, why not? Always want to make sure you give that feedback to your players. And that would be it for this time. And so, until later.